Hello, I'm Kelty Logan of University of Colorado Boulder, and I'm joined by Anthony Ho-Young Ahn of Pepperdine University. Every year, 5 papers are singled out for awards at the annual conference of the American Academy of Advertising. This year, Anthony and I are lucky enough to be interviewing all of the authors we could track down this summer to speak about their papers. And today we're going to be talking about the paper that received the Journal of Interactive Advertising Best Article Award. It is titled Computationally Analyzing Social Media Text for Topics, a primer for advertising researchers. I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Joseph Yoon, the lead author of this paper. Joe, thank you so much for spending this time with us. Regarding your paper, which was a terrific paper, was this part of a larger stream of research that you had already been working on as a student, or was this something you embarked upon as a new project?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was new in the sense that, I was a PhD student, so I'm just learning how to do research. But in a sense, it's kind of old because, or it's an older stream of research because I've always been interested in helping to explain computational concepts that have generally come more naturally to me over the course of my life. I've always enjoyed explaining those concepts to people that may not necessarily be computationally, savvy, I guess, or maybe that's not their primary focus or concern. And so in that sense, it's an older stream of research. And I'd also like to throw in that it came from my dissertation, but it originally came from just meeting different people on campus because my committee was interdisciplinary, kind of broken up between engineering side of campus and non-engineering side of campus. And so as I met various faculty members and PhD students on both sides of campus here at the U of I, so I got my PhD here, I just started to see kind of a lack of bridge at times, not fully, but at times between kind of the two hemispheres of my campus. And so it just started to naturally flow out of almost every conversation that I would have, where I would just say, oh no, that's, kind of this idea or method in computer science, or in computer science, I say, oh, that's from this theory in social psychology, and so on and so forth. And so in that, again, in that sense, it was both old and new.
My question is, 2 questions actually. One is, what is the main research question you addressed out of your dissertation? And then what inspired the question that your paper addressed? It's like a previous article you wrote, or any articles you read, or any conversation with others?
Basically, what this paper is attempting to do is to try to kind of open all of our eyes to think about computational methods for analyzing text in a bit more of a spectrum kind of way, right? So, if you don't have a fully computational background, you may think, okay, there are certain methods where you apply them to natural language and it'll pull out topics. So, I put this algorithm against this text, and then it says this text is talking about COVID and it's talking about politics. And then that's it. And then you take that and you do further research downstream from that. Well, the reality computationally is it's not that simple. And depending on what type of algorithm and method you use, one might pull out COVID and politics, and one might pull out vaccine and justice, and then one might pull out something totally different, ice cream. I mean, and it literally could be that different. And so this paper is just trying to explain, okay, here's a few different ways, the major ways that are used, algorithms that are used to analyze topics in conversation. And here's some things that you need to consider, as well as here's some tools to try them yourself if you don't have a computational background. And, take this paper and try to move forward and be I'm not saying more responsible, but maybe it'll help you to consider more responsible ways if your background is not computational. And with regards to kind of where this all flowed from, I would say that this flowed primarily from the advice and impact that my advisor, who was Brittany Duff, since she was my advisor for my master's too, it really kind of flowed from her wisdom and impact that she's had in my life. Because one of the things that she just always would tell me is, even though I kept saying, I'm so different, like I don't find anybody like me in academia, And that's making me uncomfortable. Like, I don't feel like I have a place here because, I should either be pure computer science or pure psychology or these things. And she'd really challenge me and say, but that's not who you are. You're somebody that forms this bridge. And so do that and be that. And your research should be somewhat of a reflection of that. And I didn't really know what that meant until I started doing my dissertation. And then I realized, hey, like, as people started to say, this is cool, I said, okay, like, there's a place for this. And now I realize, like, there really is a place for this. It's an area that, I have the privilege to be, helping to fill.
The question I was going to ask was building on what you were talking about, because we've been asking previous authors to discuss the methods they're using and whether that represents a departure for them. And could you talk a little bit about this in context of your paper?
For what I've seen in previous research in general, or I guess maybe I can focus it on the field of advertising, where I consider myself an advertising researcher. Hopefully others do as well. There's typically, like, researchers that focus more on theory and theoretical constructs and these kind of things. And so, their avenues of methodology could be somewhat similar or even very constant over the course of papers and even many years. And that's good because their focus is pushing the envelope theoretically. Whereas for me, my natural proclivity is I always want to learn something new when it comes to technology and computers and all these things. And so I always want to play around with new methodologies. And then as I learn them, I want to share them. So, like, I actually love, even just in the classroom, teaching new methodologies, especially to people without computational backgrounds. And so in this case of this paper, that was just a reflection of that. Like, I've got a ton of ideas right now for papers in the future that could come out that are current new methods in deep learning, or things about the blockchain that, like, I'm just playing around with, and I want to write about it, although I'm so bad at writing. But I want to put it out there, and so this was just kind of in line with that. I love methodologies, and especially new methodologies, and learning and disseminating those things, and giving tools, if possible, if it's at all possible, because sometimes it's just impossible to do it, or impossible for me, to give tools for people to do it without having to have to learn so much, before that, to accomplish the method.
What do you find exciting about your work?
I don't know. I think I'd answer that differently depending on the day, but I don't know. For right now, when you ask me that question, I guess what's most exciting is that people find it helpful and useful, and I really mean that. Like,
Let's take it a step further and talk about the implications for others in their research programs, as well as for the advertising industry.
yeah. So I hope that some of these methods and tools, especially that that my team is putting out there, that people will use them, because I do believe, even for industry, first of all, this stuff is free, so why not just give it a shot? And intentionally, I want to keep everything for free, if at all possible. And I don't even know what that means, but I really want it to be free. But secondly, if you're industry, I guarantee you that some of the things that we're putting out there are beyond the paid tools that you have available to you technically. And so I really believe that for sure on the academic side, it's helpful both because it's fairly up to date and it's low cost or no cost. But on the industry side, it's no cost, but you may have money, but maybe your money is still better spent not spending it on this, because this is even further in technical capability than some of the paid software out there. And so I would really hope that people take advantage of it and give it a shot.
Could you explain for the viewers who are not involved in computational analysis what it does, why it's important?
I think one of the most important things is it's very clear to people that if you do statistics incorrectly with the data that you have, that it's going to impact everything with regards to your paper. So you better make sure you know what you're doing when you're doing your inferential statistics or Bayesian statistics, because then if it's wrong, then your outcome and discussion and everything and people building upon your work is built on things that are incorrect. We're definitely in a state right now with natural language processing where there's no right or wrong, it's fuzzy, but there's definitely better or worse depending on what you're trying to investigate. And so you can't treat it like, oh, it's a difference between a, if we just go really basic, between a t-test and an analysis of variance. It's not like that. It's like, it's a difference between 10 different NLP methods, none of them that are clear cut, but 2 of them that are way better than the rest of the 8. And so making that decision to choose one of those 2 really will determine, I believe, how valid your paper is and how long your paper will have longevity once people in the future that when all this becomes a lot more just, natural and NLP gets much more accurate, and people will say, oh, this group of research, it's not as valid anymore because, in a sense, quote unquote, the statistics that they were doing, because it still is all computational statistics, it was just incorrectly handled. And I'd like for as much as possible for people not to have to go through that.
This has been a terrific discussion. It's so interesting, and I think you've given us all a lot to think about and some new plans to make. And thank you very much for that.